The game is that of opposites. It's polarity. It's ease and effort. It's grace and strength. It's, water, fire. All of these things are playing a role in the practice. And I couldn't guarantee, if we become aware of where we're lacking, where we can contribute a little more effort, where we can notice something just a little more intently. And that's a process of, awareness of breath and knowing where your body is in space and really being calm and taking your time to really find yourself and go within. I mean, these are all the essences of a yoga practice. And when we're not paying attention, or when the legs out or the arms flapping overhead, we are not becoming aware and we're not focusing on it. And it's in that moment, that little moment, it's that beauty of balance, the presence, that's where it gets all lined up, and that's where it all gets dialed in. And so, handstands, a handstand practice, is really like any other practice. And so I feel like my introduction originally to the practice of handstanding was through vinyasa yoga, or that was the visual that I had of lots of transitions, step forward, step back, having the feeling of lightness of being into your hands and less into your feet, and then landing very softly. I feel like that was the introduction to like, wow, this is its own thing. This is its own practice. And being maybe a little overzealous or overconfident, I just dove into that practice of trying to learn how to handstand or trying to mimic what I was seeing or what that practice was like. And really, so it was just the intuitive nature of doing something very challenging for me physically, which is really the reason I fell in love with yoga in the first place, because it was a great physical challenge that you really had to kind of apply yourself to and really dial in. Well, as I learned and I had this affinity towards a hand balance practice, it is very much so many elements of a yoga practice. How to be patient, how to stay calm, how to try to release and ease tension, and not to try to just grasp on and hold on to something for so long. So there's so many beautiful parallels that were at the root and essence of yoga practice that could be refined and applied to a handstand practice. And so I just naturally fell in love with it. And maybe it's like any practice or anything. My coach tells me, David, the handstand practice is an ocean. We don't know all of the things in the ocean, and it is so vast and there's so many things to learn, but we have an opportunity to literally dive in. And so from things that are like very basic concepts of putting your head below your heart, getting your legs elevated, whether you're balancing yourself, free balancing in a room or up against a wall, you literally flip your perspective. And so there's so many things that are going on with a handstand practice. And I just became immediately just addicted to it. Fascinated with it.
Derek, were you a fan of handstands?
When I was going through my teacher training, the first one in 2017, I still had a lot of spine and hip issues, meaning that I didn't have a lot of stability and mobility in my hip and my spine, my hip and my back, to really move fluidly in and out of some of those, prep work, just kind of moving up into your hands, one leg up, the other leg up, and bringing it down. It was sort of so like herky jerky about how I moved that I knew I wasn't going to have a lot of great success with handstands until I worked through a lot of that. And so, I haven't been a huge handstand guy, but it doesn't mean that I don't see the benefits of working on it if you're working smart as you move towards that goal.
Yeah. Dave, I don't know if Derek told you, but I've been teaching for the last 4 years. I've been practicing for like close to 30, I guess. I haven't done a handstand. I did a handstand once about a year ago in the new studio just to like pop up, like, hey, let's go check this out. But I haven't taught handstand yet at all in my classes. But handstands for me, there was a few things, and I might have touched on this, Darren, when we did my interview with you. Handstands were one of the things as a new yoga practitioner that totally hooked me in because it got me fired up to do yoga. Like now I'm going to make a disclaimer. I've never done a free handstand middle of the fucking room. I always needed the wall. But when it came to like headstands, I always felt like I had to get that just right on the top of my head and everything to make it comfortable to be there. But the handstand thing, like I remember getting it up and hanging out there for a bit. And my teacher at the time being like, he came over and was like, great job, dude, great job. And it was like, I remember leaving the class and for the next couple of days being like, I fucking did it. I was up there. And you're right. When you flip your perspective like that and you chill the fuck out and hang out, and then you start to engage everything that you need to hold that up, it's really powerful, dude. And so tell me about how you approach it at Sweat and how you approach it in your classes. Is it like a workshop that you do? Is it like a class? Is that like always your peak pose?
Well, no, that's a great question, Larry, and I appreciate that. Something that I think that is important about handstands is that they can be a bit intimidating. Totally. And so while it looks like it's maybe the peak pose or something that you're supposed to elevate yourself to be able to do, in a lot of respects can be a big turnoff. So in that way, I regret that we do not have a big handstand community at Sweat. There are certainly people that like to add a bit of arm balancing and handstanding into their practice. But our handstand classes and workshops are really just periodically. So we run a yoga school and we'll add an advancing the pose class that kind of touches on all of those like types of inversions, and handstand being one of them. Mm-hmm. For a while, we had a course that was biweekly that was called Flight Club, where it was an open class, kind of an open mat type of concept, where my son and I and a few other teachers, we were teaching like kind of the basics of arm balancing. And as we saw in the beginning of offering those style of classes, there was a bit of a popularity and there's a bit of a buzz about it. But those things slowly started to die off and it starts to roll off. And for nobody's fault, but that doing things like handstand requires commitment. It requires time, and it really requires you to practice. And if you're not practicing, it just becomes kind of a thing that's frustrating. So handstands not being for everybody, we don't necessarily make it a focus as part of our community.
Got it. Would you say I'm sort of thinking back to when I was at class in LA, one of the things they would do, they wouldn't even put us up in handstand. They would just have us for like 10 minutes, get in the position like you were going to do a handstand and put one foot forward and just practice the hop.
Yeah.
Just get used to that. Just get used to feeling your weight all of a sudden into your arms and your hands. So it was a great way to break it down. And of course, not just throwing yourself against the wall, right? But trying to sort of ease up and get up there in grace. What do you say to guys or people when they look at crow pose, they look at handstand, and they say things like, I don't have the arm strength to do that. I can't do that.
It's a great question.
Yeah. What do I say? We are all capable of doing really challenging things. Some of those require a good basis of strength. So there's a few fundamental things before I feel like we become real competent in a pose like crow or handstand that, let's call them progressions or prerequisites, like how many good, clean push-ups can I do? Can I hold myself with a hollowed out core and maybe like a boat pose or something like that? Can I maintain stability through the main structure of my body? And then it becomes something that is more a refining of small movements so that you feel comfortable and balanced and like well supported when you're in that handstand. Because it's really not much different, crow to handstand, kind of moving your center of mass. But the fundamentals are the same, is like
Mm-hmm.
where your hands spread out. Are you underneath your shoulders? Are you stacking your bones rather than overusing your muscles? And all of those things are like real fine key elements that it's not about muscling through it. Because if you muscle through it, you're just going to burn out. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just that little refining of gentle movements to get you into that place. Because in the end, you never catch your balance, but you will find your balance. And there's a key piece between having that up moment, a little bit of float, and then really being able to refine it. And that's the beauty, and that the basics are really all the same.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So what I think, Dare, you were asking before, like what would be the benefits for guys to hop into or to work toward some arm balances.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially I would say the guys who are, in the 40s, in your 40s, who maybe have a practice or don't have a practice. For guys in that bucket, like, what would you say the pros are in working towards it, and what would be the cons in trying to pursue that?
Honestly, when you're pursuing a physical endeavor, whether it's swimming or running or cycling or lifting weights or handstanding, really it I think requires kind of a deliberate plan. So if you're just going to throw yourself at a marathon, chances are it's going to be really, really tough. But if you ease your way into that and create a plan and follow it and have this natural progression by using good coaching and good best practices, I feel like handstand is really a must and is so suitable for anybody, regardless of age. So in that, I think what the benefit of handstand is that just taking it back to simple properties of our yoga practice, it's a lot about breathing. It's a lot about like chilling out and not overdoing it and just kind of releasing tension in the way that we do in any typical yoga pose. And really that is pranayama, and that's a meditation in and of itself. So the benefits immediately are: this is good for your nervous system, this is good for your body, this is good for your the balance between your strength, your flexibility, and your mobility. I think all of the pros definitely outweigh the cons, especially if you're approaching it safely.
All right, so let me ask you, just clarify. So you're saying, listen, there's nothing specific to doing handstands that has any more uh, pros than any other posture. It's just another posture to work towards, to work on, to get to get better at, to know your body, to learn how to work through your nervous system, and that whole thing. Is that right? Like, you don't see it as something that's somewhat of an advanced or something that's slightly out of the core focus for what people should be working on with postures.
Absolutely not. I feel like it is just as important to approach a handstand as you would a warrior posture. I feel like the way we approach any pose with awareness, with focus, doing so with intention, those are attributes that we can apply to doing anything in our life. So I say practice makes better practice. We never really get good at this stuff. And as soon as you're good, there's another level to go to. So it's like practice is because we practice. It's not perfect practice. And so, like, just as we approach anything, my son tells me how we approach anything, how we do anything is how we do everything. So take your time, do the work, and let it all come together.
Your son sounds like a wise young man.
He is. He had a good papa.
Of
God, I'm
course you did.
wondering, Derek, I wish there was like some place, guys could go. I'm just thinking like in the summer, like some kind of a handstand retreat camp you could go away to that's maybe exotic, right? And you could hang out with other people and work on your handstand. You think anything like that exists?
It's funny that you happen to ask that. In fact, I happen to know
What do you got?
of a handstand camp.
No.
Come on.
Are there songs and like fun things and
Oh,
fire pits and things?
exactly, 100%. There's bonfires on the beach. There'll be
Oh.
s'mores. There'll be dancing and karaoke.
Oh wow! No, in all seriousness, I was just cruising around your site here, and I see
Yeah.
this thing, handstand camp, and I'm wondering, Derek, if you and I could convince the wives that we're going to have to go to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for several days.
This is a business trip, Larry. This is a business trip.
No, you're right. You're right. We should do a GoFundMe through the podcast to go on this thing, because this looks amazing. Break it down.
So when is it? When is it?
So it is this summer. It's Labor Day weekend. So it starts August 28th and runs through September 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 5-day, 4-night handstand specific training on this beautiful private beach. And we're so excited to do this. And, this is kind of a thing. People have been leading retreats and handstand and yoga retreats a long time. Our studio often does these types of wellness and yoga retreats. But we wanted to make this one a little different, a little special in that it is specific to handstand training. And more specifically, it is of the style that I'm learning from my coach. And so I will be assisting him as, he'll be the lead coach, and then we'll be handstanding twice a day for a whole week on the beach. And so we're absolutely thrilled about it.
That's wild. Is this the guy in New York that you frequently come visit?
It sure is. My good dear friend, Virgil, Handstands with Virgil.
And he's more of a gymnastics background. He's not like a traditional yogi, right?
Yeah, he's an acrobat. Oh no. He's absolutely not a yogi. And he gives me the hardest time about being a yogi. And he says my approach to handstands are so yogi. He tells me that as in our session.
And what does he mean by that?
Yeah, what is that?
That's a great question. What does he mean by that?
Is it the candles?
Is it the candles? I'm kind of all over the place with my hips and my waist. I have this horrible twist, and so he just says it's so yogi of me to have this twist through my waist.
Hold on a second. Does he? So is that a true statement? You think that people who do handstands and yoga have a tendency to twist their hips in a certain way? Or is he just saying, listen, Dave, you've got a strange way of doing this. It's not my way.
No, certainly not. These are just the cues of a very refined coach and an eye. If you saw me practice, you would have no idea what he's talking about.
Right.
But he has such a trained eye to where we hold and where we move and how we find balance in our bodies that he sees me. And, I normally do lessons over Zoom with him, and he corrects my finger positions, like things that I'm not even noticing. He's like, you need to move your index finger in a little left or right, or, all of the very fine nuances of that. So that's just his very trained eye.
So let me ask you this. Obviously, there's a lot of cues and things that you've learned working with him. What do you think, for the ways most people learn how to do handstands in a yoga teacher training or any yoga class, what's some of the aspects that you've learned in working with someone who's an acrobat and somebody who's just an absolute legend in this area?
Yeah.
What are some of the step-ups you've learned as far as the technique and the way to approach handstands?
That's a great question. And I think the main fundamental difference between acrobats and yoga handstanding is the technique of bent elbows. In yoga, there's a lot of bent elbows. Think of how your position is for crow or chaturanga. And a lot of the balancing for that reason, not right or wrong, starts with bent arms. Acrobat handstanding is all about stability through your shoulders and your elbows. So no bending in your elbows and really getting very stacked through your shoulders. Because, and this for a very good reason, is because of the training necessary for the acts and for what they're doing for their performances. They're saving their body. And so when you're bending into your muscles and contracting your muscles in that way, you're just fatiguing over time. Whereas when you're really getting stacked up on top of yourself, not bending your elbows, you're not wasting unnecessary energy. So that is a big key component.
So crow pose, when you do crow pose, are your arms straight or bent?
Well, so there's certainly different versions of it. Crane pose would be with the straight arms, trying to tuck your knees up into your armpits, and then getting nice flexion through your spine and holding that. Bent arm crow would be, knees outside of arms or out right behind your elbows on your triceps. But that's definitely a bent arm balance.
Yeah. And then chaturanga, do you not do chaturanga because you don't necessarily want to work in a bent elbow?
Certainly not. No, let me not give you that misconception. I think chaturangas absolutely have their purpose, but from the purpose of sustainability over time in a handstand practice, we're trying to bend less into our elbows. Yeah.
So this leads me to, because I had back and hip issues, or at least some challenges in moving correctly in and out of a handstand, and I would use a wall too as well at the time. One of the poses that we learned in teacher training that was a great prep for your upper body was, you stand a couple feet away from the wall, your back is facing to the wall, and you would be on your hands, but you'd be at an L angle. So your feet would be pressing against the wall. You're in a full bent sort of forward flexion, forward fold, but with your hands on the ground. And I remember my teacher being like, "This is probably hard. Takes more strength to support this position than it does with your feet over your head." But I found that being certainly a challenging pose to work on and work in. And you certainly had to have upward rotation in your scapula to support, your arms and making sure you weren't cranking on your joints. But what do you think about that modification, or that as a prep, or that as something to work on in general? Is that something you see as being a good approach to technique and developing strength?
Yeah, 100%. So in practice, we call that like a 7 position or a half pike position, when you're bringing your feet against the wall and really focusing on scapular elevation and lifting through your shoulders and also opening up through your chest. Those are challenging positions to do. And really, there's not anything in yoga that gives us an opportunity to really get into that open shoulder, open chest position. So I think that's beautiful. And the first time you put your weight on your hands like that, there's like a whoa moment. That's like, you're really bearing down on yourself and you're like, wow, this is serious. And you kind of got to commit. And, all the best of us have fallen out of that posture.
Yeah. So what about, so Larry, you had something?
Well, I was going to ask, who shouldn't do handstand?
Yeah, right.
Nobody. Everybody should do handstands. I mean, I really feel that way. I love working with children. I love working with anybody who has a desire. I feel like one of the fundamental things, and a lot like all of the arm balances, headstands, forearm stands, and such, getting upside down is a little bit scary. And if we can move away from the feeling of being a little bit fearful of falling and just being there with an instructor, a teacher, a friend to help spot you so that you can get into that space, handstands is 100% for everybody.
So what if someone's had a wrist issue in the past? Do you tell them, hey, you should strength on that, you work on that, and then get in, try handstands? Or do you just say, hey, maybe handstands aren't for you?
I hate to think about having barriers to entry or injuries that will prevent you from doing that. But certainly the health of your hands, your wrists, and your shoulders, and your past experiences will contribute to the longevity or how much you really can benefit from having a handstand practice. Certainly, if you've compromised in those joints in a major way, yeah, rehab's the best place to start working on that there.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you have people do as a prep in a class? Let's say the handstand is the peak pose. What are some things you do to get people oriented with their wrists, opening up their wrists, getting their hands ready, getting their shoulders primed?
Yeah, certainly. Well, like most things, anything in a vinyasa style yoga practice has a lots of times on hands and wrists. So proper stretching, opening up hands and forearms, getting your muscles ready, the big pushing muscles of your body, your triceps, your chest, through chaturanga, up dog, down dog. Those types of movements get you really prepped for handstand. I also feel that there's a benefit for bringing your head below your heart for a little while so that you can get into that place um, of a little bit of rest and digest. So forward fold with wide legs, getting your hamstrings open, getting ready to invert yourself as you support yourself. And really, any of those are great prep.
If you've got someone who's never done a handstand before, are there like, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but are there like, here's like the 5 things we're going to do over time to get you, can you break down sort of the blocks, the modules of how to get someone there? And then I'm going to end it with this one, Dave. How does it make you feel as a teacher when you see someone who's worked, and then all of a sudden they do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So five's the roadmap, we'll call it, to successfully doing a handstand. I think push-ups are mandatory. Being able to load your body up in a plank style position is really step one. Working your way into forward compression style positions, forward hang, forward hinging, being able to really draw yourself down and in will also contribute to the success of you learning to stack your body. Opening up through your waist, doing prep of goddess pose, horse stance, any of these types of things where you can get down low and work into the base of support of your waist and hips is really going to help your spine open up and help you feel like your body is now available to do handstand. So let's see, that would be 3. Boy, combing back the basics are very important.
Well, probably the feeling that weight in your hands, like you were saying before.
Yeah, and I think one fundamental move there that's very important, and that is not it's not articulated very well in this way, and that there's a very common misnomer that we're kicking up into handstand. You see a lot of action where one leg comes up followed by the second leg. The problem with that style of motion is that a body in motion stays in motion until some other body stops it. And so lots of times that pattern is hard to stop and we continue to fall out and fall over. What I have learned and what I'm trying to teach is just a slight little nuance in that the leg movement is really the same, but the bottom foot that's still on the floor is jumping and the top leg is not kicking. So now what we've done is we created a movement that we're stabilizing using the major muscle groups of your body to load and stack your hips. That once your hips are over your shoulders, you can finally kind of line yourself up. And it's a little slower and a little more graceful movement than just kicking and kicking and kicking. So that little detail alone of learning to jump into a handstand rather than kicking into a handstand can be a nice light bulb moment.
That I think is super cool that you just pointed out, because I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people do, right? To try to kick themselves into it. And that's when you hear people slamming against the wall, all that shit, right?
Absolutely.
But walking it right up till you get that load and then the balance, that makes perfect sense.
It really is a more graceful entry. And I think the goal in all of the entries into handstand is to be graceful and to be gentle and soft as you move through space. Don't force it. Don't rush it, because it just becomes ugly and you just got to kind of pull it back in. So everything that's a little slower, a little more graceful in handstand entry.
Dave, what are some of the, when people see someone doing a handstand, obviously they're thinking, my God, they have to be strong in their hands and their arms and their shoulders. What are some of the lower body muscles that you think people who don't really do handstands may not realize how critical are, not only to get into the pose, but to stay in the pose?
Yeah, one of the most important things about maintaining handstand and really having nice aesthetic lines and having things work together in your body is the ability to really point through your toes. And so pointing through your toes, let's take it to the extreme of thinking of a ballerina pose, or really trying to really point through your foot, really flex through your quads, straighten your knee, squeeze your glute. The effort that is made through the legs and the lower body by just the engagement is so very important. And it's oftentimes underlooked. It's not the thing that becomes the focus, especially as the practitioner, that immediately handstanding into my hands is all about, oh my God, I'm handstanding into my hands. But the other end of it is we have to think about what we're doing on the other side, using those muscles to contribute to sharing the weight really makes all the difference. So lots of the cues that I'm learning are, my teacher tells me it's all about your legs. It's all about your legs. It's all about your legs, because I'm losing engagement there. So that focus alone can take so much away from all of the push and the effort that was required into your hands, but really the squeezing of the major muscles of your legs really gets your body to find an alignment.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a guy I interviewed who was also into handstands sometime back in 22 or 23. And I think it was in 22. And he was saying that as soon as you started thinking like, I'm in a handstand, he's like, you fall out of the handstand, because your focus now is totally like you've lost what you should be paying attention to, which is all the stuff that you just hit. So, yeah. So what else about handstands? Is there kind of do you have some counter poses you like to do after doing handstands that started to kind of work on sort of,
for sure,
as a counter to doing all that and tremendous inversion work?
For sure. I think it's really important to open up your shoulders, take some time to really stretch yourself out after a big session. And then doing opposite poses, back bends, and really trying to open yourself up can feel good, because it can be very taxing. Serious folks with arm balance practice for several hours a day, multiple days a week, and they can be just brutal on your body if you're into it that much. And so really taking the time to open up your shoulders, open up your hips, contribute to your flexibility and mobility really just will help sustain a much longer, healthier practice, for sure.
Yeah. Do you ever use props in helping prepare for the poses? And do you use any props like in a restorative for opening up the shoulders or the back or the chest?
For sure. Supported bridge with yoga blocks can be beautiful. Even one block on the high side or medium side, you could stack a couple blocks to help you there. There's always great extra props like, a yoga wheel or even a chair to really get yourself to get up and over the top, like you're rolling on a beach ball. Even a beach ball or a fitness ball would feel amazing to get you into that position.
I think what part of it is too, guys, is like, when you're a kid, most kids, they got no problem flying into a cartwheel or some shit. But then as you get older, you're just on your feet, or you're sitting, right? But that's why when you have that moment when you do a handstand, you're like, oh, now I kind of feel it again. It's like you're sort of just reconnecting with that feeling of the weight and stuff in your arms. It's like almost like doing wheel. you've just gotten away. Kids, not all kids can do like a wheel, right? But when you kind of do it, you you don't feel those muscles until you do it, until you even get close, and then you're like, oh, okay, and then you can start making the adjustment. And I think if you can just get people away from the fear of the thing and just let them start to feel it, then they'll build that confidence to do it. I want to jump back real quick to something you said about keeping the legs engaged, legs engaged while you're doing a handstand, because obviously everyone thinks it's the arms and the whole thing. I notice in class a lot, and I've started to harp on this in classes, that even in something like Vashisthasana, like a side plank pose, right? Or even in the warrior poses, when in like warrior 2 and your arms are outstretched, people fucking like from their forearm to their fingertips just dies. It's just dead. It's just like they're engaged in their shoulders and whatever, and everything else is just dead. And when you're doing, even side plank pose and you've got that arm up in the air, let's say, like that will help you stack your shoulders and lift your hips up and engage the rest of your body to be strong to do that. So it makes perfect sense that in something like a handstand, headstand, whatever, thinking of lifting and sending that energy through the soles of your feet or whatever it is, can help you feel that length. Because again, it's all about that dual energy, right? Pressing down, rooting down, lifting up. That's my 2 cents.
That's beautiful. You made just 2 beautiful comments there, Larry. And I just, the game is that of opposites. It's polarity. Yeah. It's ease and effort. It's grace and strength. It's, water, fire. All of these things are playing a role in the practice. And I couldn't guarantee, if we become aware of where we're lacking, where we can contribute a little more effort, where we can notice something just a little more intently. And that's a process of, awareness of breath and knowing where your body is in space and really being calm and taking your time to really find yourself and go within. I mean, these are all the essences of a yoga practice. And when we're not paying attention, or when the legs out or the arms flapping overhead, we are not becoming aware and we're not focusing on it. And it's in that moment, that little moment, it's that beauty of balance, the presence, that's where it gets all lined up. And that's where it, all gets dialed in. And to your point, as you were saying before, talking about children in wheel or the cartwheel, or that feeling of that opening up, you mentioned about getting over fear. And the exact opposite of getting over fear in that way is the creation of joy and happiness. And that is exactly what happens. And that we become stimulated by the sense of joy, the sense of play, what we're doing in that way. And that's why handstands can be fun, but that's why they're also challenging, because we have forgotten how to play and how to find joy and to just not take it so seriously and just go for it.
Yeah.
So Dave, have you ever had, sorry, Larry, go ahead.
No, I totally agree. Yep.
So Dave, have you ever had a situation where you momentarily lost your joy in doing handstands because of an injury and you were like, fuck, I can't do handstands for a month?
Knock on wood, Derek, I have had no major injuries that have kept me from my practice. Wow. I feel like I've had a serious handstand practice now for about 5 years, under the eye of a coach, in a structured method where I'm really getting after it and I have a goal. And this is my practice, and I keep starting and doing it again and doing it again and making the necessary adjustments and doing again. And so, to answer your question, has there been anything that has been injured or limiting? It's only that of my own internal will and desire to get back up after I fall over and do it again, because it can be crushing. It can be the most joyous, beautiful practice, but it is also so difficult. And like I said earlier, it's a vast ocean. And as soon as you learn about one area, you have another area to explore. So there's so much. So maybe I don't give myself enough grace in how far I've come in my practice and what my practice means to me, because I have these aspirations of like one day doing a one-arm handstand on a cane, on a beach somewhere incredible, sunset, having my moment. And I'm going to work really hard until I get there, until someone tells me I'm too crazy to keep going.
Yeah, well, I've seen some of the great, by the way, for those who are listening, if you want to check out Dave on Instagram, it's Yoga with Dave. And there's a lot of there's some tremendous handstand shots you have up there. And I think one fairly recently was you doing a one-handed arm balance, right?
Yeah, that's been my current goal, and my training program has been towards the one arm progression. And as one of my good friends and fellow handstander has told me, the investment and time that you have in one arm handstand is the worst investment you'll ever make, because it takes so much time and effort and practice. And so right now I'm in the middle of, having a moment, a couple seconds of hang time, if I'm lucky, 5 or 6. But yeah, I'm right on that edge of exploring what one arm balance is like.
And so when you had to pick a side to first start with, which side did you choose and why?
Well, that's a really great question. And I'm not sure that I understand all the nuances that surround the answer to this question, but it's a lot like how you write, or how you kick a soccer ball, or what leg you'd put on a skateboard first if you were going to kick and move on a skateboard. You have a tendency to be either right side or left side dominant. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the same through all of your body parts. So had I thought that I'm eventually going to move into one arm handstand, or maybe the first few times I attempted one arm balance would have been in my strong arm, which is my right side. It's my dominant arm. But lo and behold, that is the much weaker side for my single arm balance. And I feel like I'm year behind or more of learning how to balance on my right arm as I am with my left arm. So my left arm is more dominant than my right in single arm balance.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. As you work on your single arm balance, are there other yoga poses, standing, sitting, twists, back bends? Is there one or two that you also have a passion for working towards and getting better at?
The one that I have a passion for that I'm really working on is all the variation of the splits. Forward splits, lateral splits, being able to be open in the hips so that you can find a lateral split in your handstand practice will contribute to my ability to move into single arm balance practice. And so for me, that takes a lot of work. I'm not open in that direction. I'm a little better in lateral splits than I am in side splits or pancake position. And it feels like I've been working on it for years and it's making very little progress, but there is progress there. And so any of those hip openers and big hamstring lengtheners have been instrumental in my practice.
Was that something your mentor was like, hey, you should work on this. This will help getting towards your single arm balance? Or just something your body told you because as you were doing your single arm balance, you're like, wait a minute, I need to have this intelligence in a different way.
It is a very obvious deficiency in my practice. My ability to open my hips and my waist in side splits or pancake position limits my ability to stack myself up and use my legs as a counterbalance. They're more of a counterweight. And so they drag me down. So being able to open myself up is huge.
Wait, so just to clarify, the splits help you counterbalance in a single arm balance, right?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a couple different classic variations of single arm balancing. Probably the most common is a wide straddle splits through your feet to use your legs as your counterbalance as you kind of teeter totter over onto one arm. And those that have great flexibility and that are open through their waist and their hips have that nice counterbalance. You can imagine it's like, kind of like a teeter totter, kind of bending and moving over the top of a fulcrum. And when you can stack your shoulders and stack your hips and use your feet to help you balance, you can kind of get and have a little bit of hang time. In that position for me, I am very heavy because my feet don't stack out wide. They more come into a pike position. So the second common position is like a less of a wide straddle. Sometimes they refer to it as a fork, that the feet are a little closer together and that as you lean over, you stack shoulder over foot over hip, and then you can kind of find your alignment there. In that position, I am the most capable in single arm balance. The final one, which would maybe be considered the pinnacle of the practice, is the single arm balance, leaning into one side with your legs together. That's what all the pros do.
So when you work on stretching for these splits, are you also doing strength work for your abductors or adductors as well? I mean, or is it all just stretching?
No, it's definitely strengthening as well. I need to maintain good strength in that area. Lunging, all of those step back, dominant muscle groups are important to strengthen in moving into a little more flexibility and mobility as well.
Yeah. It's wild. Larry and I are not far behind you. I don't want no pressure.
It's vast.
You feel like you're being chased, but we're coming up fast.
Yeah. I welcome more men to the practice. It's like I said, it's absolutely for everybody, but it's not for the faint of heart, because it does take a little bit of effort, and it is absolutely not easy, but it is certainly worth it.
Any special tunes you like to put on?
Dude, that's a great question, and I really appreciate that question. One of my favorite things to listen to is the Guys Talking Yoga podcast. It has helped me really get in the right mood.
You really want to focus. Instead of focusing on your median line and your feet and your toes, you're listening to the Guys Talking Yoga podcast. I love it.
Yeah, it feels like it's right. But really, I like kind of all types of music. Sometimes I like just real chill, yoga drums or some Native American flute, or other times I get a little, hip hop going. My wife got mad at me yesterday because, it's 7 a.m. and I have the Black Keys, at many decibels just hitting hard, because sometimes that's what it takes.
Yes. Now Sweat, the studio Sweat, is your studio.
That's right.
You and your wife own the studio. You opened the studio. You went on vacation. As far as I understand from Derek, you went on vacation with your wife. You'd never done yoga. You took a yoga class. You got fucking hit by the lightning bolt, and you're in. And then you decide to open a studio. You're like, I'm going to go so deep, I'm going to open a yoga studio. How long has that been going on?
Well, it's not that romantic. There was a few stops along the way, but the short of it was that, after my first moment having that yoga class, I had an awakening moment that something I needed to pay attention to, something that I'd been missing it all my life. It wasn't until I was 42 years old or something that I first took a yoga class. And so there was a little progression of a few life events that happened for me to commit to taking a teacher training, and to diving in, and then taking an advanced teacher training, and to getting in further. And there was a moment where my wife and I looked at each other and says, we should do this. And we did it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me real quick, the yoga community in Albuquerque, New Mexico. What's the
The yoga
vibe?
community. Yeah, the yoga community in Albuquerque is very strong. Albuquerque is like kind of a small, big town. There's lots of studios in Albuquerque. There's like kind of a big movement for um, mobile yoga studios. There's a big vibe. There's a couple yoga festivals that go on nearby. Also in Albuquerque and in nearby communities a little further north up in Taos. So there's a lot of things yoga, a lot of opportunities to practice here for sure.
That's awesome. Derek, we got to make a pilgrimage, man.
We sure do. Do you consider Santa Fe part of the community as well, as far as the yoga circles, like groups?
Yeah, 100%. You know, we do have a clientele that come down from Santa Fe that specifically come to Albuquerque because of sweat. You know, we're a unique hot room in that we have a steam generated humidifier and
Nice.
we heat our room to body temperature with 70% humidity. So it's like you're doing yoga in the jungle and there's like this thick, heavy mist in the air. And, you know, we do exactly as the name says, you know, it's like we bring the heat and you bring the sweat and, you know, it gets serious in there. And so, people seek us out from all over the state to come up and check out our hot room.
That's awesome.
Yoga in the jungle.
Yoga in the jungle.
It's
for
phenomenal.
those of us on the East Coast, what are the two best months or the best, so two best months to consider booking a trip to New Mexico for the weather, like the best times of year?
That's a great question. New Mexico has incredible weather, like 350 days out of the year. So there's really not a bad time of year. One of the famous times of year is Albuquerque is home to the largest single event hot air balloon fest. And so every year, the first 2 weekends of October, the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta takes place, and that's a magical event in itself. There's like 700 or 800 balloons that fly all week throughout Albuquerque, and so that's a big thing, and that's pretty fun. And then the mountains during that time of year are full of beautiful fall colors, and it's a really nice temperate time to be here. And I would also say, you know, right about now, especially if you're a snow goer, when things are a little bit chillier on the East Coast, you know, the Rocky Mountains have a little fresher, little lighter powder, and there's nothing like a bluebird day on a nice fresh hit of a little bit of snow.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Larry, we're going to have to figure out an excuse to get out there.
I think so. We got some peeps out there we got to go see, man.
We totally do. Dude, Dave, it's so great to have you back on. For those who are listening, we did our first interview. I did my first interview with Dave. It was episode 44. It was in December of 22. Check it out. Dave tells his story, how he got into yoga. Larry was just teeing up some of the story that of Dave's path. So definitely check it out. He's also Yoga with Dave on Instagram. And sweatyogastudio.com is the website. And Dave, a reminder, I think we've had some stuff up in the past and we might have something more recent, but you know, shoot us over any workshops or trainings or things we can put on our site, gtypodcast.com. We'd love to continue to help promote what you're doing out there. It's just
appreciate that.
We love our peeps in Albuquerque. All right. Well, listen, looking forward to the next time. Dave, good to see you, man. Thanks again. And
Pleasure,
we look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you so much.